Welcome to StarTalks powered by Advotalks. And today we have with us our esteemed guest, who is a digital data legal expert, Advocate Chaitanya Hariharan. After completing a graduation in law, Advocate Chaitanya Hariharan, with her inclination towards the technology, has taken a step to pursue Master of Law in Technology, Media and Telecommunication Law from the prestigious Queen Mary University of London. Chaitanya has immense knowledge and expertise in the fields of intellectual property laws, technology laws, and the commercial laws. She has significant work experience in the fields nationally as well as internationally. She has been associated with multiple projects on the subjects of evolution of technology and the rising challenges. Today, she has joined with us in Star Talks to express her views on the data protection laws worldwide and the way forward. I should admit that I am quite excited to host her. With that, I warmly welcome Ms. Chaitanya Hariharan to our talk show, Star Talks, powered by Advotalks. Welcome to our show, Chaitanya.
Thank you so much, Siraj, and thank you to Advotalks for organizing this series called Star Talks. And I'm really, really honored to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, Chaitanya, to start with on the topic today, so can you help us understand what is data protection as such and what are the various laws that are available surrounding the data protection?
So data protection is generally defined as a law that is there to protect your personal information, which is collected, processed, or stored by any automated means. Now, to simplify it, what does it mean? You do a lot of digital transactions daily, right? You use your phone, you use the internet to do multiple transactions wherein you input your personal data. Now, let's say like you shop on Amazon, which is obviously an internet service. So
Yes,
you basically put all your personal information there to shop. So Amazon basically has your name, your phone number, your addresses, your bank details, and even
absolutely.
including your card number and your CVV, which is now just imagine the kind of control they have over you with when they've possessed so much data. In
Right.
another instance, you use social media nowadays, like you use Instagram, you use WhatsApp to like upload pictures, send pictures to your friends. Now the parent company Meta has access to all of these photos and informations and audios and videos that you share. Imagine a situation where they misuse your photo, or they use your personal information for the purposes that you didn't allow them to use it. Now imagine a situation where you didn't have data protection laws at all. So basically, data protection laws gives you a recourse in a scenario where your data has been misused by these companies. That is the basic provision of this law.
Okay,
But
okay.
now, obviously, with the evolving nature of things and increased digital presence of people,
Yeah,
and the nature of data protection law is also changing and evolved, and now it has like deeper aspects to it where people have the right to know where their data is stored, for what purpose is it stored, and
right,
now also that if their data is not stored for that very purpose, they also have the right to ask the company to delete it. So, as and when the times are evolving, data protection law is also evolving. But the basic idea of a data protection law is that it protects your personal information that is in a digitalized format and where
right.
like
So,
somebody has control over it.
yeah, you have very clearly explained. I was in an assumption that, mostly data protection is something that, will be dealt by the enterprises and then probably the governments, example in defense and stuff. And I'm getting a feeling that, at the individual level, at the personal level also, the data protection laws are going to be of your rescue in multiple scenarios. Like the way you have explained the, citizen community trying to interact with these, e-commerce website and stuff like that, and in the background there will be a lot of data that would be processed. Basically, they would be collecting your data in some fashion, and then they would be processing it, and then I think like there are questions on the protection. So now I wanted to understand what kind of legal regulations actually govern the procurement as well as the safe processing of the personal data. Say something like my PAN card details, or my Aadhar card details, or maybe a passport, right? So how the regulation actually controls and then conducts some kind of for the benefits of the citizen community.
So when you talk about laws and regulations that are already in place to govern your personal data, India, as such, does not yet have an all-encompassing regulation that deals with personal data. We of course have the IT Act 2000 that deals with fragments of your personal information. Then we have the IT Rules 2011 that deals with social media intermediaries and all those sort of platforms regulating your data. Then we have certain sections of the IPC that deal with, uh, all of these things, and you have specific laws in the banking and the financial services sector, the insurance sector, the telecom sector that deal with data in those sectors. But when you talk about all these laws and when you see how the technology is evolving, you know that fragments of law here and there will not help you uh, protect your personal data which is out there as a whole, right? So that is why the need of an all-encompassing regulation was felt,
Right.
and the government has now passed the Digital Personal Data Protection Act
Okay.
in
Right.
2023, which has now received the presidential
Right.
assent, and now it's going to be a law probably in the coming year. So that will be the first ever law that India will have that deals with, personal data as a whole
Right.
and not
Right.
just
Right.
like fragments.
Right. So that's quite interesting. Like the whole journey of the data protection as such, as you mentioned, I think the IT rules has been there, and then some sections of the Indian Penal Code also have have a reference to such kind of instances and offences, and then other prohibitive measures. And subsequently, the Major Information Technology Act 2000 also has certain provisions related to data protection, is what I feel. What were those instances that led us to our journey towards Digital Personal Data Protection Act that is about to come in 2023? Can you tell us the scope of Information Technology Act 2000, ma'am?
Okay, so basically, to start with, primarily the scope of the act is to deal with cyber crimes, is to facilitate e-commerce, e-governance, and e-transaction. Act basically gives recognition to digital signatures and e-record keeping. So we need to
Right.
understand that when this act came into place, the intention of the makers was not personal data protection. The intention was, you know, digitalizing what was already in the records and stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
that was the intention of the act. But then, as and when the law evolved, it also went on to protect certain facets of personal data. One of the
Right.
main things that the Act has given us is the establishment of a cyber appellate tribunal that resolves dispute under this Act when it comes to misuse of, let's say anything that deals like in a digital space, anything
Right.
that comes under this Act.
Right.
This tribunal provides this thing to any crime involving a computer or a computer network located
Right.
in India.
Right.
Foreign nationals can also be charged under this act. So when you look at it, that is the scope of the act. However, the act does not deal with all aspects of collection and use of personal data.
Correct.
Hence, the need for one regulation was felt, and that is how we have now the DPDP.
Okay, so with that, there were definitely some loopholes and lacunas. I mean, like we should admit that with the evolving nature of the businesses performing multiple activities of data capturing, especially when it comes to the safety of the information. So I think like that
Yeah.
is the need of the hour, and those challenges which we have been facing as a community from even having the statute in the form of Information Technology Act 2000. So I think like that is why we need some act like Digital Personal Data Protection Act. I'm quite excited to know some key features and provisions of this particular act, Chaitanya.
Of course. And like just to add to your previous point, and if you see that nowadays there is a lot of cross-border data transfer, especially
Absolutely,
since the pandemic and all the remote working and
absolutely,
everything. There is a lot of cross-border data transfer which could not be properly regulated under the IT Act, which was also another reason which led to the enactment of the Digital Data
right,
Protection Act.
right, right, right. You have brought the right pain point that that has pushed us to kind of pursue towards the DPDP Act. So, like I
Yeah.
said, like what are the key provisions that are available through the newly coming act?
So before we go into the provisions of the act, it is important to understand why this act and how this act came into place.
Right.
So in 2017, the Supreme Court laid down a landmark judgment in the very famous case of Justice K.S. Kottaswamy versus Union of India, where
Right.
the Supreme Court recognized the right to privacy as a fundamental right under the Article 21, where it talks about life and liberty. It is the Supreme Court recognized that the right to privacy is a facet under that article. So now, when the Supreme Court recognized this, after that there was an effort that was made to protect the personal data of citizens, and that is how the Data Protection Bill of 2019 came into existence.
Okay.
But that bill obviously had a lot of lacunas because the scope of the bill was very expansive. It spoke about establishing a digital protection authority, and that particular authority had a lot of regulatory powers.
Right.
And India at that point was not in a place to, sort of have an authority deal with a law, because A, the law is new,
Mm-hmm.
B, and nobody in India had prior experience to sort of legislate
Deal
or,
with such kind of,
regulate in that
yes,
space.
the disputes and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
litigations. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So which could have led to potential this thing of over regulating or under regulating. So
Correct.
then after a lot of discussion and deliberation, this Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023 has come into.
Okay.
Now, when we talk about the applicability and scope of the Act applies to the processing of digital personal data within India, whether it is collected online or in a digitized format from offline sources. So, what does that
Right.
mean? If you have a paper which you have scanned and uploaded it somewhere, as long as it's in a paper format, it doesn't fall under the purview of the Act. As soon as it's in a digitalized format, it falls under the purview of the Act.
Okay. Okay.
The
This is a major
second,
difference.
the
Okay.
scope, yes, the scope of the act is, again, the act is extended jurisdiction to data outside of India if it is uh, if it is collected for the purpose of providing goods or services in India. So
Right.
if there is an authority that is outside of India who does not have an establishment in India, but
Right.
they are collecting Indian citizens' personal data, or a person based in India's personal data to provide goods or services, they also will fall under the purview of. Now, this act also provides certain rights to the data principal. So, data principal is the person whose data is being collected. So, you in this case are the data principal, and the
Okay.
person collecting and processing your data is called the data fiduciary.
Okay.
So, the act also provides certain rights for the data principal, which is the information about how your data is being processed, why
Mm-hmm.
your data is being processed,
Okay.
the right to correction. If there is some mistake or error, you have
Right.
the right to correct it,
Okay.
and also grievance redressal, as was also there in the IT Act, which is,
Okay.
obviously being continued.
So the party which is actually capturing the data and then probably taking the management of the data is called fiduciary, and that person would be liable in multiple instances if there are any certain situations, like, if I feel that, there is an offense committed through my data, or probably the way in which, it has been shared or stored is kind of, not convincing for me. So all such kind of situations are covered, I guess, right?
Yes, exactly. So
Okay.
now, when as we spoke, there are also certain obligations on the fiduciary, which is to ensure that the data is accurate, to maintain security, to delete the data when its purpose is done, and similarly. But the Act also provides some exemptions for government entities from data erasure and storage of information.
Right.
And certain rights and obligations under the Act do not apply in cases of, say, special circumstances where it's for an investigative purpose or to
Right.
prevent a crime,
Right.
likewise. Another very key feature of this act is the transfer of data and its exemption. The
Mhm.
act permits the transfer of personal data outside of India, except to the countries that is restricted by the government. So, this provision in the act allows smooth cross border data transfer, which is now becoming very essential.
Right.
The Act also establishes a data protection board,
Mhm.
in which it proposes the establishment of a board that will oversee compliance, impose penalties, address data breach, and handle grievances. So you, of course, you have a mechanism for
That's
grievance redressal as well.
So
under
that's
the
a
act.
wide range of provisions that have been brought through the I mean like the act, and I think like multiple activities that happen in the day-to-day life, be it in the commercial aspect or in the place where the common man or the citizen is actually sharing the data. All of those instances are brought into the ambit, and I am really looking forward for effective legislation and administration of this particular act in the coming days.
Yes. Yeah.
While I understand a lot about the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, I have this curiosity to understand what were the real world cases that have actually pushed us to kind of think over. The experts had to sit and then come out of say a phenomenal and paradigm shift in the statute through the DPDP Act, and I'm sure there may be examples across the world which would have actually led to this. So what was those
Yes.
instances which led to major mismanagement of the data, maybe the sensitive data, and then consequences were too huge to consider this kind of a change,
Precisely.
Chaitanya?
Precisely. So, if I don't know how many of you guys remember before the whole pandemic and the lockdown and everything, there was one thing that was haunting our daily news. There was Mark Zuckerberg doing rounds of the US court. What was that for?
Yes,
That was actually
yes,
a data breach scandal. So that is called the
absolutely.
Cambridge Analytica scandal, which happened in 2017 or 2018,
Right,
2018, I think.
right,
So, what actually happened in that was Cambridge Analytica is a data analysis firm,
right.
and they exploited Facebook and like they exploited Facebook users' data to such an extent that using that data, it is alleged that they rigged the 2016 US presidential elections and even the Brexit vote. So when all of this happened, they were called into question, and Facebook actually lost 18% of its shares in 1 week.
Yeah.
They had to pay $725 million as a fine to settle the suit, and Cambridge Analytica eventually declared bankruptcy.
Yeah,
All of this because
that's a
citizens got,
massive incident. I think like that shook the entire world, especially on
yes,
the digital usage. People were really kind of it was extreme to probably log into our social media channels and stuff like that. There was a lot of happening at that particular moment. Yes, yes, it's
exactly.
nice
And
thing. Now I
post
can
this
recollect
incident,
and
a
relay.
lot of,
Yeah, now I can
yeah,
actually recollect
this
and relay
incident,
multiple questions that was actually that were actually sought from the Mark Zuckerberg himself, being the owner of the Facebook. Yes,
true. And post this incident, a lot of Facebook users deleted their profile. And I still know a lot of people who haven't sort of gone back on Facebook after this because, it really brought to light a lot of issues that,
right,
how can you misuse a user's personal data
right.
and manipulate a democratic process that is like the highest extent of, using
Yes,
somebody's data.
yes.
Now, if you have to hit it home in October of this year, allegedly there was a data breach, there was a data leak that happened in the ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research,
Hmm.
where about 81 crore Indians' data, personal data that says addresses, passport details, phone numbers, names, Aadhar Card details, was leaked and was allegedly for sale on the dark web.
Okay,
So and this data also included 1.8 TB of the doctor's data, which included
okay,
their passwords and their medical sort of history with patients and everything. So
okay.
now imagine a company who actually has hold of all of this data.
Right,
They are actually in an advantage in like a bio warfare sort
right,
of ground
right.
if
Absolutely.
they
There are
have
multiple
access to all of
concerns
this
which may
data.
actually arise. Yes, yes, yes. Right. Please continue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are some of the instances, and if I recall very vaguely, around 3 or 4 days ago, about this week, there
Hmm.
was uh there was a case wherein a retired Bombay High Court Chief Justice
Hmm.
was was sent a message saying that if you don't, it's the last day for you to like update your PAN card details, and there was a link, and
Hmm.
when he went on to that link and he updated his PAN card details,
Hmm.
50,000 was just taken away from his account. And when the bank called him and asked, "Have you made this payment?" and he said no, and then he immediately realized that he was a part of this fraudulent activity. So
So a
he was
lot of
actually a victim of this fraudulent.
cyber fraudulent activities also kind of, are
Exactly.
good that actually we can bring those activities also into the ambit of the law. Yeah, so thanks a lot for bringing a lot of cases, which has actually made us realize the importance of the data protection regulations as such. So while we spoke about the aspects of data protection regulations, there is a certain level of global legislation as well that we should understand on the data protection and privacy, right? So can you help us understand a bit about what are the goals and objectives of something like GDPR, Global Data Protection Regulations?
Absolutely. So when you talk about global data protection, GDPR is one of the strongest, legislations out there that protects a person's data. You have, along with the GDPR, you also have the UK Data Protection Act of 2018, which is an exact replica of the GDPR, but it
Okay,
came into effect in 2018 post the Brexit, because then UK left the European Union and they
right,
wanted their own Data Protection Act. So that is
right.
how the UK DPA came into. Apart from that, on an international level, say US has this consumer or California Consumer Privacy Act, which is, California based, and there other states have other acts. The Personal Information Protection legislation, which is the Personal Data Act in China. So these are significant examples of global data protection. Now,
Okay,
all these laws share one, couple of common principles. That firstly, transparency of what is happening to your data, which is paramount, because in a situation where you have given your personal data to an entity, you have the right to know what they do with it, and you have the right to retaliate if they don't do the exact same thing that they promised they would. They also, all these legislations have one more thing in common, which is like the purpose of collecting your data and the limitation, where if you don't want to give it for a certain purpose, you must have seen all these key notices and cookie policies when you
hmm.
open a
Yes,
website that
yes,
say that
yes,
we
yes,
process cookies for XYZ reasons.
correct.
Those XYZ reasons, if you untick a box, the company who's collecting your data has to make sure that they are not using your data for that purpose that you have unticked. So
Okay,
that's
yeah,
not just there, just for you to go and click on the website. It
hmm,
actually means something.
right,
That is how the company gives you a notice saying that this is what we collect your data for,
hmm,
and this is what you consent to. So tomorrow, if you bring about a legislation, they have the right to pull out that cookie policy, and their privacy policy, to show that you have consented to your data being processed in a certain
right,
way.
right, right,
And of course, all these legislations have given individuals a right to manage their personal data, which I think in today's world is a huge relief, when you are actually, giving away your personal data to an unknown entity and you
right,
don't know what they will do with it after
right,
giving.
right, right. So, with that, I definitely wanted to understand some key differences between the global data protection regulation and the, you know, act that we have, the Digital Data Protection Act. So, can you just suggest us between DPDP Act and the GDPR, like what are the differences that have been there that we should significantly know, because we keep working and engaging into activities which may be cross border, as you have referred in one of your previous instances, and generally we hit the world wide web, so there is a lot that I am reaching out, or probably other person is trying to reach me out from across border, or away from India. So what are the key differences that we should understand from the GDPR and the DPDP Act, Chaitanya?
Okay, so as I said, all data protection laws globally have this thing where they have given individuals control over their data, and they also mandate that the organization that is collecting their data must use it lawfully. That is a common thing between both the statutes. Now, when we talk about the scope of the GDPR extends to the entire of European Union, which is more than just one country.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
on one hand, where the DPDP Act is just applicable to India,
Hmm.
the GDPR is applicable to a cluster of countries. So, I would think that the scope is a bit more when it
Right.
comes to GDPR.
Right.
Secondly, data localization. That is one thing that GDPR I feel is personally where GDPR shines for me is where it comes to data localization, which essentially means that GDPR mandates that you must store a personal data that you've collected from a European Union person in
Mhm.
EU itself. But
Okay.
the DPDP Act does not have that provision. It does not require
Okay.
that, you know, companies who are collecting Indians' data should store it in India. You can store it overseas as well,
Anywhere. Okay.
which for me I think is a bit where GDPR shines, where
Right.
it sort of mandates that data should
Right.
be locally stored.
Right. Right. Right.
Thirdly, when it comes to consent, the GDPR requires explicit consent of individual before processing the data.
Right.
But I think, as we have discussed before, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act allows to process a data allows to process a person's data without consent in
Mhm.
certain cases where it talks about public interest, or like I said, for investigation or
Right.
preventative purposes.
Right.
That is not there in the GDPR. It requires explicit consent, come what so may.
Okay.
And in the case of data breach, I feel this is where the Digital Personal Data Protection Act shines for me, where
Okay.
the GDPR says that organizations have to notify the relevant data protection authority within 72 hours.
Okay.
Our act also mandates the same thing, but along with that, the organization also has to notify the person whose
Mhm.
data has been breached within 72 hours. So you
Okay.
would essentially
That's
be,
in this
yeah,
case, like the victim of the data kind of
yes,
exploitation will also
yes,
have a right to kind of get that particular instance, and maybe the offense committed,
yeah,
maybe that will give a kind of buzz and alarm to him to safeguard some more of the
exactly.
aspects. Yeah,
Yeah. So
pretty
these
much.
are some of the differences between both the acts, but in general, the GDPR is considered to be a more stringent statute
Right.
only because of the consent point and the data localization point.
Right.
Otherwise, as you know, as we come out with our law and we start implementing it, we'll see how it,
Right.
progresses and the complications that come with it.
Yes.
But I genuinely think that the Digital Personal Data Protection Act that we are going to have is really something that we've been looking forward for a very long time, and now finally we'll have it.
So with that, I think the introduction of the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, basically, we have got a kind of wonderful opportunity to bring it into the statute, and then probably kind of attempt to multiple challenges that we kind of keep on facing on a day-to-day basis. On the technology front, we keep kind of ourselves close to the updations and the evolutions, and then these kind of challenges are always there, and I guess like the statute is going to help us to kind of well protected, if not fully protected. Probably some kind of awareness and some kind of discipline are also required from the community of the citizens, is what I could understand. With that, this brings to the end of the great insightful conversation, Chaitanya. So for helping us, our audience, understand the various aspects of the data protection laws in India, as well as in the global aspects, as well as the way forward, like what exactly we have got recently, and how we can actually utilize it for the benefit of the society as such. We heartfully thank you for bringing all these insights, and we appreciate your time, right? And thanks a lot again, Chaitanya.
So thank you so much to Advotalks and to you for organizing this really, really well. And pleasure to be talking and looking forward.
Yeah, yeah. So that's about the today's episode with Advocate Chaitanya Hariharan, who is a digital protection legal expert, which brings a lot of insights on the data protection laws and the perspectives on the governments, citizen community, and the enterprises. We hope the conversation was knowledgeable. For more updates and information on legal concepts, please visit our website advotalks.com, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Advotalks.